This is Dr. Rabbi Larry Hirsch. Stay tuned. Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug.
Oh, everybody talk about that. Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us today. My guest today has been on the show a number of times before, but I'm so happy to welcome him back, Rabbi Dr. Larry Hirsch. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you again. As many of you who are regular viewers on the show know, Dr. Hirsch lives in Beit in the West Bank in Israel, and he is not only a rabbi on the side, but he is a medical doctor, and he not only works as a doctor in Israel, but he also travels to the United States periodically throughout the year to doctor patients here in the States. And he is also a political analyst and commentator in Israel. He writes articles which are published in Israeli publications about political and social situations going on in Israel. And I'm so glad to have you back on the show to do this update now for the 57-79 summer season. And tell me, we've just been through elections in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu was reelected. Bibi became prime minister again. However, he failed to put a coalition together to have enough seats in parliament in the Knesset for his government to take control. And so I believe, if I understand it correctly, and by the time this show airs, it's probably going to have already been concluded, but there will be another election again to decide if he is going to have more seats or less seats to work with if he is still going to be prime minister. And it could be someone else also, is that correct?
Well, it could be somebody else. It's not guaranteed that he'll win again. The probabilities are that he'll win again. He does have a few little wrinkles that are coming up that could change things. Back in April, it was April 4th, we had the first election. The next election, September 17th. And that encroaches on his legal battles, which originally, and I'm not sure if they've been rescheduled, were coming up in October. Uh-huh. So the legal battles didn't seem to hurt him at all in the April election.
No, they didn't.
And on the face of them, I think a lot of right-wing people, I voted right-wing, look at the charges and they are a little far-fetched. They range from accepting cigars and champagne.
Right, I heard that.
To the charge that with the editor of Yediot Achronot, which is one of the leading papers, Bibi supposedly, Prime Minister Netanyahu, put forth a proposal: you give me good coverage in your newspaper, and he was going to, on his side, Bibi was going to give in return, when the odds are that that never occurred at all. That Bibi has the leading daily newspaper, Yisrael Hayom, in his pocket, always gives him favorable coverage. He doesn't need Yediot to give him favorable coverage. The odds were that Yediot Achronot, which is hurting in its circulation, probably, the editor probably went to Bibi and in an effort to get up his circulation, said, I'll give you favorable coverage if you do favors for me, which the favor was shut down Yisrael Hayom. And there was actually a vote in the Knesset to do exactly that, and Bibi actually helped squash such a bill. So the reason why they were going to
can actually vote to close down a newspaper?
Only Yisrael Hayom is a freebie, and they felt it was unfair competition to have Adelson a billionaire, giving out free newspapers for years.
Did they have advertisement in them, that paid advertisement to help cover the costs, or did he
Israel
completely cover it?
Hayom, I don't know. I don't want to say. I'm not sure. I believe there are advertisements in there. But those are the levels of the charges, and most people
Sounds
basically
silly.
said they sound silly. Bibi's kept the peace. And then when you look at who he's running against, there seems to be no competition. I mean, Netanyahu has a degree in architecture, has a MIT degree in economics, was a fantastically successful finance minister, and who he was running against was a team of Lapid, who was finance minister and admitted to the country. I don't know anything about economics minister.
Who spoke to us at APAC this past year? Lapid was there.
And
so did Gantz.
he quite forthrightly admitted, I don't know anything about economics, and he was running the country's economy. And Benny Gantz, who's basically a failed general and businessman himself. He had a startup recently, failed. He was chief of staff, all right, but the things that he overseed, 10 years before he became chief of staff, he was in charge of Israel's evacuation of Lebanon, which allowed Hezbollah to come in, and this was done under Barak, in I believe 2001, a chaotic...
Ehud Barak, a former prime minister.
Right. Barak said, I'm getting us out of Lebanon, but that merely, not only did the vacuum allow Hezbollah to come in with its whatever it has now, over 100,000 missiles threatening Israel, with no Israeli presence to stop it, as well as total chaos. My own son-in-law was in that evacuation. He was in a tank, and wasn't the tank commander, but they got 45 minutes, get out of Lebanon. And all kinds, everything from personal items like their tefillin, their phylacteries. My son-in-law didn't, forget his, but to computers and other equipment that belonged to the army, which never should have been allowed to fall into the hands of Hezbollah, fell into their hands. A totally chaotic mess. So people know that probably Gantz isn't the security man he wants to say he is. He was the chief of staff from 2011 to 2014 with two highly controversial military incursions into the 2014, the famous, maybe more famous Tzuk Eitan, where we've still got two soldiers' bodies we didn't get back. That probably isn't Gantz's fault, but I will give you one little insight into what went on there in Gaza. The day before the election, April 3rd, the Jerusalem Post ran in Tel Aviv, and I went to it, took the day off from work, a whole day, talked to all the candidates. The prime minister wasn't there, but everybody from Ya'alon, Boogie Ya'alon was another commander-in-chief of the army. He's on the list of Benny Gantz and Lapid, blue and white. And to watch Ya'alon, everybody got 20 minutes, 25 minutes to talk. To watch Ya'alon talk and watch Feiglin talk.
Who's been on our show, two episodes with Moshe Feiglin, who also has wanted to run for prime minister.
So they asked Ben Caspid, one of the leading journalists in the country, asked Ya'alon about going into Gaza in 2014. He was defense minister, and the question was, wasn't it a rather failed incursion? And Ya'alon just exploded. Said, well, we destroyed 10,000 homes and terrorist dens in Gaza, and it brought us peace. People kind of laughed because it wasn't total peace, and there's been days with hundreds of missiles coming out of Gaza, as opposed to a very similar question Caspid put to Moshe Feiglin, who didn't explode, and said simply that I was on the security cabinet and I was the only one who voted against that incursion. So another journalist asked, why'd you vote against it? And Feiglin said because there was no overall strategy. There was just go in and pound them, but what were we gonna do with Gaza afterwards? And he said, if I could not be told the overall strategy of how we're going to deal with Gaza for the future, I voted against going in. And he says, to this day, I'm convinced I was correct. I'm not any genius to say what should be done with Gaza. But I think Gaza, the overall security picture, people still trust Netanyahu much more than what's sitting on the other side. And as a resident of Beit, I would say that most of our generals are not only poor politicians, but they're failed generals. They don't deliver on security. They're very left-leaning, very tread the water. Don't make waves. Just keep the status quo. And therefore, they still believe that the PLO and the Palestinian Authority is vital to Israel's security, which is ridiculous after all the buses that have blown up thanks to the PLO.
In the past.
In the past. They don't blow up now because we're a little better.
They haven't, at least.
Yes, but there's still plenty of terrorist attacks, plenty of shoot-em-ups. They've been armed to the teeth. One of my neighbors just, the last day of Hanukkah was shot at. Shira Silverstein, that's her maiden name, lost her baby in utero.
That was terrible.
And
we talked about that last time we were together.
And basically the Army's position is lower the number of roadblocks, don't police things, and actually I don't think any forthright security, they do, they are the Army and they do what they need to do, but to have a more proactive program, it's not coming from neither the government, not even from Netanyahu. And Yaakov Katz, the general editor of the Jerusalem Post, has for years been attacking Netanyahu.
I just was with also at APAC.
Because basically it's tread water, and we're in a rut. And this is a very it's a historical rut. If you look at old articles or YouTubes from the 80s, you'll see the same problems. What do we do with the Arabs? What do we do with the West Bank? What do we do with Gaza? What do we do about Lebanon? What do we do about religious versus irreligious? And all those questions, the country needs to be shaken up and go somewhere. Yaakov Katz is correct that we don't have anyone who's running for prime minister who is forthcoming with how to get this country out of the rut that it's in. I think the only ones who even tried was the left under Rabbi in Paris, Yossi Beilin and Sarid, with a fantastical, totally delusional program. We're going to bring in the PLO and they're going to increase our security and give them what they want and arm them to the teeth, and we gave them arms. And all it did was allow 1,600 people to be blown up and shot up. But at least they tried. I think it's very difficult. I mean, I have my own little pet theories. One of them is obviously to eliminate the PLO and the Palestinian Authority. Yes, I think the people who are proposing sovereignty, the woman in green, Nadia Matar, and the other ones who are in with her, Katzover, I believe is her name. If the program works for Puerto Rico, they're citizens and don't vote, and nobody screams and yells about the anti-democratic maneuver done to Puerto Rico. I moved to the country. For 3 years, I was a permanent resident. I had no right to vote. So I don't see why non-Jews can't be given every civil liberty as well as the autonomy to run their own. But I don't, as a Jew in the Jewish homeland, and that's been a big issue. We recently had our our bill passed defining us as the Jewish homeland, which seems ridiculous.
It's only ridiculous because everybody considers it that, but it was never put as a public statement in that way.
And so we remain in a rut. It's almost a biblical problem. It is a biblical problem. You know, we just had Shavuos. The country was in a rut for 400 years. And they had a man, you know, we read Ruth on Shavuos. Boaz. Boaz, Hebrew, literally means this man has chutzpah. This
we read
man
it
has
different
strength.
days. You read it on Sunday because the first day of Shavuot was Sunday. In America, we had a second day, so we read it on Monday on the second day of Shavuot. So you read it on a different day than us.
But the man realized, you know, a biblical Yaakov Katz, we got to get out of this rut. So what did he do, for example? Shvot HaShoftim, the period of the judges was everybody's convinced I'm right, and he's wrong. So Boaz actually went out, and if you remember from the book
of Ruth?
The book of Ruth, he said, well, we even have to greet people differently. And this is Rav Matis Weinberg, one of my favorites. Hashem imachem, God's with you. In other words, if the problem is everybody thinks they're right, ish kol yashar be'einav, you say, he's right. I'm not right. Hashem imachem, God's with you, you're right. And they answered with a blessing. In other words, here was the greatest man of his generation, who normally you would think you go to the Rebbe and he gives you the bracha. He's asking everybody else for the bracha. In other words, something needs again to push us out of this rut, and you don't have. I think Bibi is a very brilliant guy among everybody running and practical. I mean, Barak is brilliant also, but not very practical in the things that he ended up doing. But Bibi, again, is another, he'll leave you in the rut and tread water, and that's what's going on.
I mentioned to you earlier that Rabbi, Professor Daniel Gordis, was speaking to us here in Chicago, and he said that the real reason that Netanyahu won, because it was a close race with Gantz, he said that the reason that he won is because the people were convinced that even with rockets flying, that Benjamin Netanyahu was not going to go to war and send their children into Gaza in a war, and nobody wants their children to go to war, and that's why he won. What's your opinion about that statement he made? Well,
the other side of the coin is, well, that people were convinced that Lapid and Gantz would go to war. I don't think so. I think people were more looking at the overall security issue. Bibi's kept our security for all these years. Gantz, again, the chaos in Lebanon, he was not the architect of the overall plan, but he was to execute it, and he didn't do it well. I don't think it's so much that people are afraid Gantz would go to war. In fact, I think Gantz is viewed as more peacenik type of thing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the elections, we're going to end up with another campaign. There's been some big surprises. Obviously, the reason why we're going.
I hear it's going to cost Israel $160 million or something like that for another election.
Yeah, half a billion shekels. So yes, of course it's a crazy amount, and that's why the finance minister Kachlon was working very hard, trying to do anything to stop it. He said, "Look what I can do with $500 million shekels. There's social programs, and young people have no housing, and it's difficult housing in Israel, and all kinds of programs that could use that $500 million shekel, like you say, $160 million. Lieberman, although I see Russians, I work with Russian Jews. Lieberman forced the issue, and among the Russians, they view him as a very strong character, and I guess the Russians like that. The problem is that Lieberman forced the elections over the issue of how many Haredim are going to the army. More Haredim are never going to go to the army. Forcing them to go just won't do it. The army doesn't need them anyways. The army's got more manpower than it needs. Lieberman forced this issue on the country. It may backfire on him. He may not even get in the Knesset, but there are deeper issues than how many Haredim are in the army. I mean, a lot of people, yes, they're not doing their part. That's for sure. But there's a lot of people on the left. One of our more famous rock stars, Geffen, Aviv Geffen, never went to the army. Lapid himself did his army thing as a journalist, and used his father's protexia who was a journalist, Tommy Lapid, that's not the issue of the country. The issue of the country is, yes, religious versus secular issues. What do we do with the kotel? What do we do about weddings? In fact, recently a doctor's daughter had got married, an ex-American Marine, non-Jewish, in a ceremony, in a civil ceremony, in a kosher hall whose name I can't mention because I don't want them to get in trouble. I had nothing to do with the wedding. And I went. A lot of other religious docs were surprised, but this doctor has been nearly 50 years. He's a 73-year-old man still practicing. So I felt
so that's
personal
an illegal
obligation.
wedding in Israel.
It's not recognized by the rabbinate, so they're not officially married Israel-wise. So what they did was they had a second ceremony. No, in the United States of America. He's a Marine, down in that secret Marine base down in the Sinai that America's had ever since Camp David Accords with Begin and Sadat. So those are the issues: how to convert the Russians, and basically how to get all the factions united. I mean, it's much deeper than even religious versus secular, or secular versus religious. I mean, even the different types of kippot don't get together. The Haredim don't wear this knit kippah. The knit kippot couldn't get together, which was totally, ridiculous. I know why Shaked and Bennett formed their own party, but that's because the National Religious, the Jewish Home, are not open, and Bennett tried to open it up. But so those are the issues with the election. There's been other things going on. The surprise result of the election was Ayelet Shaked. It's not Justice Minister. Amir Ohana is our first openly gay minister, new Justice Minister, and he is a real surprise.
He's a right-winger.
He's a right-wing politically, right-wing stance, and therefore the gays in Israel don't like him. I mean, the gays, we just had our gay parade, which I thought was very...
Are there protests for that in Israel?
Well, I thought it was very surprising. There were some protests, but this was the week. We're 1 week ahead of you on what section Parsha we read.
Torah.
We read Nasos. So the week where it says, throw out every impure tamei lanefesh from the machaneh, from the camp, from society, then the gays have to march right through the holy city of Jerusalem, as well as the same parsha has Nazarite, where the common man, he can partake of this, share in the same holiness of a high priest, of a Kohen Gadol, and yet we sort of, with our gay parade, reduced the holiness of the common man down to the lowest common denominator. And Ohana, the new minister, is a very... He's interesting because the gay parade is in the middle of Jerusalem because to show us a slap in the face, we can do this to you, holy people from the holy city, and Ohana is taken a stand. I'm against gay rights, specifically gay rights, and it's wonderful because people shouldn't be labeled he's gay and that's what he is. No. I mean, he's a minister, and he's against specific gay rights. Very many years ago, a rabbi who's gotten into trouble, Barry Frondell, was the head of the social work department at YU, did studies in the 80s when the AIDS epidemic was going strong, and he said, don't separate the gays, bring them into the synagogue. Don't let them have their own synagogues and institutions. You're just going to ostracize them. And we are in a big battle not just in Israel, but over the world. Back when we made Aliyah, 1989, the AMA had a convention in June, and we heard over them, my wife and I, over WBBM radio. We were driving out to Camp Mosheva, and Gayst have taken over. The AMA convention shut it down. Mr. Leader of the protest, why are you doing this? We want to teach America different. There's too much traditional morality in America, and traditional morality is under siege. And Elchana is very different. He doesn't believe in that, and he's taken flack for it. But that's one of the big wars that's going on. So much so that even in the army, for a while, the traditional family's under attack. A couple of months ago, the army tried, instead of having the new recruits, mother, father, having parent number 1, parent number 2 on the form, and there was such a hullabaloo, it was thrown out. But Israel, like America as well, with gay marriage being okayed here, the next step, and I've read this, it's been published, John Brockman's books, where one gerontologist said, well, now that gay marriage is a fait accompli, now we've got to take on traditional monogamous marriage, because isn't sex just another form of entertainment? With the shifting sands of people's relations, who needs it? And throw out investing in another person, throw out loyalty, and that's, try to raise a family in shifting sands. And so that's what's going on in Israel. Wow. Not security and other issues as well.
So just briefly, in the last 30 seconds here, do you feel safe where you're living?
Not always. I mean, there's been a lot of shoot-ups very close to us.
I know that.
And
talked about that last time too.
Yes, and most of the time, yes. But the way to do it is you can't have. Rabin used to say you can't have soldiers every 50 meters. They actually, for the gay parade, had policemen every 50 meters. But we've now got a bigger, stepped-up presence of soldiers and police than we've ever had because of all the recent murders.
Well, let's hope that everything stays safe. And once again, I want to thank you for coming onto the show. Rabbi Dr. Larry Hirsch from Beit in Israel, from the West Bank, as is his home. And thanks for coming to Chicago again, and thanks for being on the show. I want to remind you all, if you check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, you can see former shows on the web and former episodes with Rabbi Dr. Hirsch. And if you want to email us or email him, the email address is info@tvrabbi.com. I will forward any emails to him, and I know he'll get back to you personally. Thank you again for being on the show, Rabbi Dr. Larry Hirsch. An update from Israel, and hopefully the next update we'll hear some more positive news, because there's a lot of stuff scary going on, as well as a lot of political turmoil going on in Israel right now. But we look forward to better things, and we look forward to seeing you next time right here on Tape with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
You're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.